Hello, everybody, and welcome to 30 Minute Thrive, your go-to podcast for anything and everything HR, powered by MRA, the Management Association. Looking to stay on top of the ever-changing world of HR? MRA has got you covered. We'll be the first to tell you what's hot and what's not. I'm your host, Sophie Voller, and we are so glad you're here. Now it's time to thrive. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 59 of 30 Minute Thrive. Today, we're going to dive into the world of email, specifically inbox intelligence, and discover when and why it's your most powerful tool. So today, I'm joined with expert Andy Maris, MRA Learning and Development Instructor, as he runs through his tips and tricks on using email in our professional lives. So thanks for being here today, Andy.
Happy to be here with you.
Okay, so let's start out with the positives. Andy, what are the key advantages of using email as a form of business communication in today's digital landscape?
Well, email's really fast. You can reach a mass audience very quickly, and it's documented forever. It's a great follow-up tool on a conversation or a meeting, so that we talked about this before, right? People know what to do when, but it's also a great way to inform people of things that are easy to understand, right? Mm-hmm. If it's confusing, though, I wouldn't put it in an email. And then, of course, it's a great documentation tool.
So now let's flip that question. What are the biggest challenges of emails?
It's really fast. You can reach a mass audience really quickly, and it's documented forever. Literally, the pros are also the cons, because once you hit send, that's gone. Anything that's real complex or difficult to understand, that's just going to make it a difficult concept, and then they're going to not get it. You can't watch somebody react. You can't read their body language on if they get it or not. You can read that in somebody's face when we're looking at them. You can't get that out of an email. And it is a big one when you're emotional, right? Be very careful to take a break, get yourself collected and cool, because if you type when you're emotional, it's going to come way worse on the other end than even you intend. Sometimes you got to, go take a walk, yell at the trees, whatever you got to do. Take a deep breath. But you want to make sure you're careful with those emotional emails because it comes off way worse than you originally intended. And then anything that's not for public consumption or confidential, as we said, email is never gone.
Yes. Great point.
In addition to that, tone is really difficult to read. What a cliche. I'm using my mother-in-law as an example, but when she says I'm fine, she's fine. When she says I'm fine, I don't know what I'm going to find out later, but it's going to be a while before she reveals that, right? Well, you can hear that in someone's tone. You can't read it very well in an email. And so that's also a problem. And then even the mechanics. I had a woman I worked with years ago who had she was really into grammar, kind of being the grammar police. And she had a really funny sign on her desk that said, "I'm silently judging your grammar in my head." And it used to make me chuckle. But even something as silly as using a colon instead of a semicolon or a comma after your greeting, that's supposed to be the business way to do it. I couldn't care less. I'm not the grammar police, but something that simple could set your email sideways. And then also the design really matters. We've probably all seen somebody that has a very stylized background, and because of it, it's really hard to read. Sometimes people use a whole block of text and it's just, your eye doesn't know where to stop. And so there's lots of things that can go wrong with it, even though it's a wonderful tool when used well.
Yes. I'm picturing now the worst emails I've ever gotten or written, but I feel like I'm like an emoji person. So in my emails, I will always add an emoji to help with tone so that they know hey, I'm not meaning this in a bad way.
And that's what emoticons are invented for. But then is it a smart aleck smiley face or a happy smiley face? And then how professional is that, right? So you got to know your audience when you're sending that out.
Yeah.
But that is the purpose, right? To add tone to text.
Absolutely.
And that's not soft serve, Sophie.
So what examples do you have on when tone was maybe misinterpreted with email?
I've got a funny one from several years ago. I had a participant in one of my classes, and we were talking about how difficult tone is to read. And I was in Chicago, and I remember as we're discussing this, she kind of starts laughing, and she says, "Well, I've got kind of an embarrassing one that just happened to me." And I said, "Well, are you comfortable sharing?" And she said, "Sure." And she said, and folks, this is not necessarily the people at your company, but she said, my IT guy is kind of the stereotype on Saturday Night Live where it makes you feel bad for doing his job. He comes over and like, click, click, click.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you even plug it in? That guy, right? So she like, he insults her, then fixes the computer kind of thing. That was her relationship with him. And so there was a vulnerability. There was a virus going around. And he wanted to save some time. Now, this was many years ago. I remember when I was in the IT industry years ago, they used to call this sneaker netting because the IT staff would put their sneakers on and run from computer to computer. This is before they had all these things behind the wall. They could just fix it.
Yeah.
Well, he sends out an email because he's going to try and get to each computer, but it's going to take him a while to get to everybody. So he sends out an email. So if they can install this patch to keep them from getting the virus, all the better if they can beat him to it, right? So he sends out this email, and I'll quote unquote read it to you. It says, "Hello, there's been a huge virus going around the country. We want to make sure we don't get it. Here are the steps to install the attachment." And he did remember to attach it, by the way.
Oh, good.
Because that's always an oops, right? Here are the steps. And then in bullet points, which I love, right? I want it to be one pane of glass. Bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, all the directions on how to do it. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jim. It said, please. It said, thank you. They sprinkled in a little tone. She was so angry after reading that, she went running to HR. Look what I have to put up with from this jerk. She had it in her hand as she printed it out. Any idea why? It's pretty funny when she realized what had happened.
I don't know. Why?
Because, her human resources person's looking at the thing and go, what's wrong with it?
Right.
It's very technical. There's nothing emotional about it. And she read it and she reread it. I'll give you a hint. It was just one word. It was at the very beginning. Do you remember how that email started?
Hello?
Yeah, hello. It's a greeting, right, Sophie? Like, hello, how are you?
Yes.
What's wrong with that? Well, can you think of any other interpretations of hello? Maybe you've seen the movie Back to the Future.
I guess.
Hello, McFly. Everybody home? She read the entire email as if he was knocking on her head like she was an idiot.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't there.
Based on one word.
Based on one word. We read tone into our messaging, and that's what we're up against. I think that's scary. I also think it's a very funny story.
That is funny.
But wow, right? This is what we're up against. And that's why your idea about the emoticons, right? Or the emojis, that's why we use them.
Maybe he needed to add a smiley face.
Yeah, I don't know. And then she might have thought it was a smart aleck smiley face. So who knows where that would have gone. But that's what we're up against.
It's a good story. So are there certain situations then where using email might hinder rather than enhance business communication?
Yeah. If anything has to be confidential, don't put it in an email. There is no such thing as a confidential email, which is funny because there's even a little button you can push that says confidential. It's not defensible in court at all. Mm-hmm. And anyone in the world who has an email address can have that sent to them.
Exactly.
We've seen so many examples over the years of people getting in trouble because of email, and it gets found. Even if there's been stories of people using software like BleachBit to get rid of emails. And sure, that got it off your server and your computer, but it's still on the server or the network or the computer of the people you sent it to, or the people you sent it to who sent it to somebody else.
Yes.
And so it really has no end in mind. It can go on forever as long as somebody has an email address. So that is kind of frightening. Don't put it in email if you wouldn't want anybody to read it outside of normal conversation. It's kind of like the tree falling in the woods. If nobody hears it, did it really make a noise? Well, everybody hears an email because it can be forwarded to anyone that has an email address. I also run into different relationship things, right? So once you hit send, as I said, that can change the relationship forever. And so we see people using false urgency, urgent and exclamation point and red and all caps, and all those things can really set people off. If it's too long, on one hand, too wordy. And then if it's too abrupt, not wordy enough. It's funny how this really can have a lot of problems. And typing in an email when we're emotional, that can really cause problems because tone is so hard to read.
Yep. It
comes off way worse than even we were anticipating. And if we're heated when we write it, it comes off as furious.
Yeah. Going back to your, that emails are not confidential. It's kind of like social media too. Whatever you put on social media, don't expect it.
There forever.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be there forever. It lives forever. But we talked about some of these challenges. How can you overcome them?
It's a good question. One of the things, we had that podcast a few podcasts ago where we talked about meetings, and I talked about, can this meeting be an email? If it's something really simple and easy to understand, well, you can ask the opposite question. Should this email be a meeting?
Yes.
If it's more complex, we better do that, right? Emails for simple concepts or to follow up is when it's best, right? So we use, I learned this from my colleague Janet. I love this. She calls it the grandma or judge rule. If you're going to make grandma blush by what's in there, or you got to stand in front of a judge, don't put it in an email. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's something to really remember when you're considering what you're hitting send.
Yeah, absolutely. With. Any other scenarios where you should not definitely send an email? Or I know we talk about here if you're writing and you can't just quickly send it, you should just pick up the phone and call that person. Or if you have to explain something, it's so much easier just going in person or picking up the phone. I
like to call that the 3-thread rule. Mm-hmm. That if I've sent it, they've replied, I've sent another one, it goes back 3 times, pick up the phone and call them. Mm-hmm. If you can see them, even better yet, go see them face to face. But you're just going to pile on the confusion, the lack of clarity, the more you try to explain something in email if it's not understood. Well,
I think everyone here and who's listening can agree that we simply get way too many emails, though.
Sure.
And that means that a lot of emails can also be missed, too, because our inbox is so big. So how can you make your message stand out among the mass amount of emails that we already get?
Lots of ways that really help. You really want to think of your reader's perspective. Mm-hmm. I tell this joke in class. It's lame. Sarah heard it before, but WIIFM in the morning. It's what everyone is listening to. I had to do my radio voice there, but it really doesn't. It's not a radio station. It's what's in it for me is what that stands for. And that joke doesn't work west of Mississippi, by the way. Everything starts with K. But anyway, we want to put our tone and our message in their reading perspective, right? Not how do I want to best send it? You know it. You've got your message. It's in your head. How will they best receive it so they can act? And so I have to kind of put myself in their shoes. How does this make sense to them?
Yeah.
Is there a meaningful and searchable subject line? I encourage people actually to fill that out second to last. People usually type it right away. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's actually something that I prefer to do once I've written the whole thing, because sometimes if I start out with a subject line in the email, it could change significantly by the time I've typed it. And by the time I hit send, maybe I need a new subject line anyway. I think I want to make sure that it's searchable in case somebody's looking for that in the future. That's easy to find. And it's not, just to get their attention, or it's cutesy and you cry wolf because it really wasn't that important, right? And there's that urgency thing again.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes me think of you customize your emails based on different people too. So I know some people who would just want one word in the subject line, they'll open it. Or I know another person who would want a detailed subject line. So it's also funny thinking about the person who you're sending the email to, how it changes, basically.
There used to be, people would use it like Instant Messenger before Instant Messenger was a thing, and it would say EOM for end of message, and everything was in the subject line. Yeah, don't do that anymore. We moved on, right? But that was a thing years ago. One of the things I always suggest is to make sure your message as much as possible is on one pane of glass. Now, of course, you've got your Surface in front of you. Pane of glass is about this big. What about cell phone, right? Can you get it so small that they don't have to endlessly scroll? Now, that's not always possible.
Yeah.
You need to give them enough information that they can take action. But the shorter, the better.
Yeah.
And I even prefer, if I can get away with it, bullet points as opposed to endless paragraphs, right? They got to scroll and scroll. It's probably not going to get read.
Absolutely. Well, we talked about when you should not send an email or use email as the best form of communication. So do you have any specific scenarios where email is proven to be the superior choice for professional interactions?
It's an awesome follow-up tool. I love, after a phone call or after a meeting or even a face-to-face conversation, here's what we spoke about. Bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. so that, the person can take action and we can remember and it's documented, right? So that people are going to say, well, you didn't say that, or we didn't agree to do that. Well, here's what we agreed upon. And if they disagree with it, then we can have the discussion over the follow-up email.
Yeah.
But I think it's a tremendous tool for that. I love that. It is great when you reach a mass audience.
Yeah.
So we can do that really quickly, really efficiently. Just be really sure that it's ready to go before you hit send.
And with like follow-ups, like you said, the meetings, you can include resources then in the email too.
Great idea. Great idea. One of my favorite things with helping people tailor an email message is to help them understand that if you know the communication style of the person you're emailing, that can really help you. Folks that are very analytical want lots and lots of information. Folks that are what are often called drivers or dominant communication styles, they want it as short as possible, right? Well, how can you make both happy, right? If you're sending to a mass audience,
right?
Well, what I suggest is you have it short, but then have a link is best if you can have a link. Or second best is an attachment, but you got to make sure you remember to send it, attach it right before you hit send. We had that oops moment before, right? But then anyone that wants to swim in all that data and information can go to the attachment or go to the link.
Yeah.
And a person that couldn't care less, doesn't have to read all that, still gets what they need to be able to act on that email. And I think it's really important to remember business email should be actionable. Right? It's for accomplishing things. And so there should be some action tied to it. It can be just to make something clear to follow up, which I think is also a good tool. But usually following up on something that needs to be acted upon.
Yeah, that's a great point. So how does email contribute to effective collaboration, especially when working with remote or international teams?
It's a great question, right? Follow-up is so critical when you're in different time zones. I mean, it's critical even in the same building.
Yeah.
But that really helps us to make sure everybody is literally on the same page, is doing the right things at the right time by the due dates. Email makes that really easy, and it can be asynchronous. Somebody could open it on the other side of the world, and it's instantaneous, right? So that is a really great factor with it. You can add the little @ symbol in somebody's name, and you can actually send it to several people, but actually have individual call outs where they have different action items they have to do. And so that can really use it. You can use it that way as a collaboration tool, and people can read it when it's most convenient to them, their time frame, their time zone, right?
Yeah.
It was just kind of a funny little ad. I try to tell people, don't put good morning, good evening, good afternoon, because you don't know when they're going to read it. It might be that time when you send it. It's just a little awkward. It's not a big deal. But I want to make sure that is, maybe it has a greeting, because I think that sprinkles in some tone. I like using people's name if I can. My colleague Cheryl says it's the most beautiful sound to a person's ears. And I say that the way they like to be called it too. I'm Andy. Somebody calls me Andrew, I think somebody's mad at me. So especially mom, right? But yeah, I think that's how we sprinkle in a little tone, because it is really hard to read.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's really considerate when they can read it when they're able to.
Yeah.
And the email allows for that in a collaborative way.
So how about then some of the other email etiquette rules that people may not know or just generally think of?
Great question. And there's no Emily Post guide to email etiquette. There's nothing like that.
Yeah.
But I think most people will agree on a lot of these, because they've just seen it abused so many times. They get irritated when they see this. One thing, especially you just mentioned about international, for example, I want to reflect the formality of my reader. If it's a first-time conversation or email thread with somebody in another culture, I probably would start out with "Hello, Ms. Bowler" or "Hi, Ms. Bowler," not "Hey, Sophie," right? Yeah. It's not as professional. But if they then reflect back a more casual tone, then I think that's a good place to start. Limit those emoticons and those emojis that we talked about. Is it professional?
Yeah.
It's okay if you've got that type of relationship and they know you. But here's the biggest one for me as far as etiquette. We've got to watch out for that reply to all button. I am so tired of somebody saying, "We're ordering from Cousin Subs. What do you want?" And somebody replies to, "Oh, I'll have the turkey with extra mayo." I don't care. I didn't ask. Drives me up a tree, Sophie. Reply to all when everybody needs to know.
Well, and there's like emails where people are like, just reply to me. And then it's like, reply to all. Hi.
I got to give some people some grace on this. I understand that there's certain phones that if people reply from their phone, it automatically replies to all. Well, then we should talk to that company and get them to fix that. But that's just beside the point. So then, assume good intent that they didn't mean to send that to everybody. But good gracious, I don't care about your turkey sandwich if I'm not taking the order.
So now looking ahead with the rise of AI and automation, how do you really first see the evolution of email's role in business overall?
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna not know whether it's a human being or a
Yes.
AI writing us on one hand, but I think it'll be even easier to find what we're looking for. Even if somebody does a poor job in the subject line or the message. If you need it 6 months later, what did that person say? What do I need to know? I think that'll help us find those types of things. It's still the Wild West. We're gonna find out, but I think those things maybe could be some advantages.
Mm-hmm. And AI can help craft an email or help you create an email template. So before we close out the episode, what is one more thing that you want listeners to remember about email?
I mentioned a moment ago that we should fill out the subject line second to last, right? Mm-hmm. We don't really know what the message is going to say until we typed it.
Right.
Sure. Well, I'm pretty passionate about this, and I wish I could petition Microsoft to change this, because you should fill out the CC, and the BCC fields last. And why do you think that is?
Because you might forget. I don't know. You might forget that a certain group has to be included or a certain person needs.
So that's definitely true. Maybe I'm missing somebody in those fields if I do it too quickly. Because again, I don't know what I've typed, but I can't send it anywhere if there's nothing there. I can't accidentally go oops, and that should have gone out. And so I would love to petition Microsoft because it's in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, right? I want to have them put it in the lower right. Because when you were in kindergarten, what did your teacher drill into your head? Oh, always put your name at the top, right? Mm-hmm. And where did you put it? In the upper left-hand corner? Because we read left to right. Well, what do people do first? They put the address in there.
Wow.
It's the worst thing you can do, because if something's not ready, you can't even accidentally hit send. Now, your question about AI, I don't know. Because now they might be monitoring your keystrokes, and you still could get in trouble. So watch out for those nasty grams, right? Because some people will do that to get the emotion out when they're mad, and then hit delete. Maybe we don't even want to do that anymore. Maybe find a new way to vent your frustrations. But
that's a good point.
You cannot send it if there's nowhere for it to be sent.
I'm sure a lot of people would appreciate that change.
Yeah, and I'm so careful with that, especially if it's something more sensitive.
Yeah.
I will, if it's a reply, it puts it in there immediately, right? If it's a forward, it puts it in there immediately. I will cut and paste it somewhere else and bring it back when I'm done if I'm worried I could accidentally hit send too quickly.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So if our audience would like to learn anything else about email etiquette, do you have any recommendations for anything else MRA can offer?
So we have a great class, and of course I think it's great. I teach it, but it's called Business Email, How to Write It Right, and it's a terrific class. It's a half day, and we basically focus on the things we talked about today with a much deeper dive. In addition to that, we have an even more robust class that's business writing, and all the stuff that's in the email class is also within that class. But then we get best practices for letters and text messages and IMs and even how to make the tone come through better and all those types of things, because we have a full day to really address lots of business writing issues, because it is just so hard to read tone in any type of textual message.
Well, we will make sure to link those two classes in the show notes below. So if you're interested, you can just take a look at the show notes below and register and have Andy as a teacher.
Yeah, I'd love to see you in class.
Well, Andy, that's all the time we have today, but I want to thank you for all the great content and tips that you gave us. I think I will now think about this episode every time I debate sending an email, and I hope you do too. But to our listeners, if you liked our chat and topic today, I would urge you to comment any tips you have around email best practices or just anything that you want to add on to our conversation. Don't forget to share this episode out and consider joining MRA if you aren't a member already. Like I said, we have all the resources you need in the show notes below, including resources on this topic too. So thanks for tuning in today, and we'll see you next week. And that wraps up our content for this episode. Be sure to reference the show notes where you can sign up to connect for more podcast updates. Check out other MRA episodes on your favorite podcast platform. And as always, make sure to follow MRA's 30-Minute Thrive so you don't miss out. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next Wednesday to carry on the HR conversation.